today's edition of Back Roads of Illinois. We were bringing you lasted for farming sources and information sponsored by AgriGold. I am Cesar Delgado. I am your host of today's program. We're glad you're here on a Monday afternoon. We were talking about the cattle health for right now with H5N1. As you know, bird flu from dairy herd and beef herd. We're with Dr. Clark from Iowa State University. He is a beef specialist for the extension. The bird flu is a big topic for today. We are talking about that with Dr. Clark. Then we were talking with Tyler Shau from agmarkets.net on Back Roads of Illinois. We were bringing the beans markets for right now with Tyler. This week is Beef Week on Back Roads of Illinois. We were going to bring you cattle markets and insight on the cattle industry for this week in the show. Otherwise, this is your rural news sponsored by AgriGold in Central Illinois. This week is going to be World Supply and Demand Report from the Department of Agriculture. This report is behind the big report from January. This week is the National Farm Machinery Show in Louisville, Kentucky. This event will be bringing newest farm equipments for farm and ranch in the Midwest. Finally, the prices are high in the cattle markets with Mike Zolo at Global Commodities. He says that we are considered a call for the feeder cattle with the numbers for right now. This been your rural news for this afternoon. This is your commodity markets for this afternoon, sponsored by Kyle Bumstead. He's your commodity broker from Allendale. Well, the corn markets in the green for this afternoon. Corn futures is up at 3 to 5 cents. However, soybean futures is down at 5 to 10 cents on April beans. Chicago wheat is down at 3 to 6 cents. Let's take a look for the livestock markets for this afternoon. Cattle is up at 9 to 4 cents. Feeder cattle is up at 3 to 5 cents. Lean hogs is up at 5 to 10 cents. The choice of select cut is 310 between 324 for beef cuts. The select cut for hogs loins is 86. 39 butt markets 105, 93 ham markets is 86, 68. This is your commodities markets for this afternoon. We were talking about the calf season and grazing with Dr. Clark from Iowa State. He is a beef specialist for Iowa State University Extension. Drive, Clark. Let's begin with our discussion on calf season. What do you recommend for these calves? They will be born in the spring. Sometimes they are challenging to the cold weather.
Yeah, thank you for having me on today. So we are beginning spring calving season in the Midwest. Most of our calves are born in the spring, and spring calving season is known for some challenging weather. If we start early in the season, such as let's say January, February, it's actually kind of more winter calving, and you have to have shelter available really, just in case there's a winter storm or snow or ice or severe cold weather. Um, and then deeper into the spring, we actually struggle sometimes with moisture. A lot of times in, let's say, March, we start to get some warmer weather. The ground starts to thaw. And of course, we can still have precipitation, and we often struggle then with mud, which can be a big challenge too. Um, Mud and manure can cause some health problems. If the cattle are confined, we can get some contamination of the lot and get bacterial diseases and things like that that cause scours and viral diseases as well. But that can be an issue. Uh, there's some things we can do. A lot of it just comes down to management and preparation, preparing facilities and equipment that we might need. Using calving ease bulls, watching for calving problems and making sure we know how the calving process is supposed to go and when and how to assist. Good nutrition can be really helpful. Like I mentioned, in the cold times of the year, shelter is a big deal. But those are all some things that we can do to try to kind of take good care of those calves. The biggest thing is once they're born, they need to get colostrum. They need a good dose of colostrum, hopefully, within the first few hours of life, so they can have good absorption and protection from infections.
If the calves is born in the snow, they could be sick with pneumonia.
Yeah, there would be some risk for that. I actually worry probably more about just hypothermia, and then potentially lack of colostrum consumption, which can lead to all kinds of different infections. We don't see quite as much true pneumonia in newborns as we do in, let's say, weaned cattle. But there's no question if they get cold, especially if they're wet and cold, the immune system really gets depleted and they can be at risk for pneumonia. We also see some bacterial and viral scouring diseases that cause diarrhea. And then we also see like what we call navel ill, which is infection of the umbilicus, and it kind of ascends into the body from there. You'd be surprised at what cattle can tolerate and overcome. When you see little newborn calves out there running around in the snow, it's amazing how tough they are. But those very first few minutes, few hours of life, it really is important that they get warm. They get colostrum. They kind of get the opportunity to get up and get moving, and hopefully then they can figure out how to regulate their own body temperature from there.
Finally, what do you recommend for BRD for the winter months?
So BRD, I assume you're referring to bovine respiratory disease, and I think right now in February of 2025, we're kind of coming toward the end of that winter season. Many of last year's spring-born calves have been marketed and placed in feedlots. I think it's all about getting the calves off to a good start. I think it's all about really managing stress and practicing good husbandry and good animal care. I think if we can provide good shelter, good nutrition, good animal handling practices to minimize their stress level, that can help tremendously to prevent BRD. Then the vaccines that we talked about are an important piece of that puzzle. And then the other thing is just learning to accurately and quickly identify sick cattle, and then working with your veterinarian to have a treatment plan, a treatment protocol in place. Um, we've got lots of good antibiotics labeled for BRD. Um, that's kind of the core of treatment is just a shot of antibiotics systemically. But I think the key is finding the cattle early and getting treatment started promptly. Those would be the big things.
Thanks, Dr. Clark.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
This is Chris Clark from Iowa State University for Beef and Specialist in Ames, Iowa, on back roads of Illinois. We were talking with Tyler Shau from agmarkets.net on back roads of Illinois. How are you today in North Dakota? How was in Nashville for last week?
I am doing good. It is quite cold in North Dakota. We're bracing for another stretch of Arctic cold air. Look to see lows well below zero and wind chills 30 to 40 below. So, not something we're looking forward to, but that's what you get when you live in this area of the world. Nashville was awesome. We had a great conference, had a really good turnout, and just thankful for all the producers that came to listen to what us and our speakers had to say, as well as all the sponsors that helped us put the conference on.
Great to hear that. Tyler, let's discuss about these grains markets for right now. Otherwise, do you have any questions about the fundamental on trade issue?
Today was a relatively quiet day in the grain markets. Could some of it could be anticipation of the USDA WASDE report that's going to hit tomorrow at 11 o'clock. Maybe on that WASDE report, we'll see some minor demand tweaks. And we're not going to see anything on supply. That's pretty well wrapped up as far as yield and acres. Um, one of the things that some people are talking about is potentially seeing the export demand tick higher on this report. We kind of are we're I don't want to say we're struggling with that. The pace analysis, just the pace of corn that we're exporting does suggest that maybe we need to look at increasing demand for exports. The problem is they just came in and lowered demand for exports on a previous report. So not real certain we're going to see that in February. February is usually kind of a snoozer of a report. So really not just a ton going on. Corn ended up closing up 4 cents on the nearby. Actually had an interesting day where December corn settled at 471 and a quarter, but the high trade of the day was 471. That's a function that you don't see happen very often. Your back month contracts are settled on spreads, and the spread settled at like 20 and a half, 20 and a quarter cents, if I remember correctly, which is why that settled there. So kind of an interesting tidbit of information there.
What is your thoughts on the beans markets for right now?
Well, I'm a little bit torn there. I can take two angles. From a fundamental perspective, it's just hard for me to get real bullish soybeans just with what we continue to hear out of South America. Now, it is likely on the WASDE report that we will see a reduction in global soybean ending stocks. We're kind of estimating that we'll see them lower Argentine production 2.5, 3 million metric tons. We also think they'll raise Brazilian production by 1 million metric tons. So, net net, probably see a 2 million metric ton drop on world ending stocks. The key to not get too bulled up on that information is it's extremely high world ending stocks. So, I don't know that that's necessarily just going to be something that keeps pushing beans higher, just seeing that drop in ending stocks because we're already starting at a pretty lofty level. We continue to think about that. We continue to look at it. Exports on beans have not been nearly as great as exports on corn. You've got a biodiesel and renewable diesel industry that I wouldn't say is suffering, but their margins have got awfully slim compared to where they were just a year or two ago. So it's really hard for me to get too excited about the prospects on soybeans, but on the technical picture, you can make a case for a technical rally on soybeans. We haven't, we've seen a strong rally on soybeans in relation to corn, though. We haven't seen quite as strong of rally as we've seen in the corn market. So you can make a technical case that beans are somewhat bullish from a technical standpoint. But right now, until like your March beans eclipse the 200-day moving average, which is currently at 1068 and a half, and we closed the day at 1049 and a half, it's going to be tough for me to pick up the phone, start calling guys, tell them they need to be long soybeans here.
What is the fundamental for right now with the beans markets?
Well, fundamentals are just huge supply. It basically boils down to that. Producing a lot. I shouldn't even say producing, just planted a lot of acres to soybeans in Brazil. Their acreage numbers continued to expand year over year. Likely to see that expansion continue as we move forward. And the result is just, a lot of soybeans out there and growing that ending stock. So that's why I continue to come back to it's tough for me to get too bullish at these price levels. I think producers have to look at if they're not going to sell some, they've got to look at some risk mitigation, buy some put options, something like that at these points.
How is the technical aspects on the beans markets for right now with the tariffs for China?
Well, if you find someone that can tell you what the tariffs are going to be, good luck with that. That it seems like the news doesn't just change day by day, changes multiple times throughout the day. The last I heard on tariffs was some talk about we would probably see. I think China was going to counter with some tariffs. They weren't going to be necessarily against soybeans. I think it was on eggs and some other products that China was looking at. It's just going to be tough. Now I will say there has been some chatter that China is, looking to or comply with some of the phase one trade deal agreements that was brought about clear back in like 2018, if I remember correctly, 2018, 2019, sometime in that time frame. It's tough for us to get on board that we're going to see a lot of China purchases of beans with the Brazilian soybean harvest starting and continuing over the next several months. So maybe look for that to occur in 25, 26 crop year, so out a year. So the end of the day, trying to trade and manage risk based on what might happen with tariffs, I think is somewhat of a dangerous game. I think you've just got to pick your points of, hey, I can make this work here and buy puts when you can. And like I like to remind everybody, we're 80 cents higher today than we were in the middle of December on soybean.
Do you have any questions about the position of 276? We saw that last week.
I'm assuming you're talking about feeder cattle hitting, your March cattle hit like 278, 279. April's were 277. That's if a guy sold feeders at that level, that was a good spot because that was prior to that was a high and a lot of those contracts. And a lot of times when we hit those levels, people want to know how much higher is it going to go. That's always the man. If you knew that answer, life would be pretty easy. So anyone that took advantage of those record high prices and those contracts, kudos to them.
True. Do you have any final thoughts on the world supply for next week?
Nothing that I haven't really talked about. Like I said, we kind of look for the world ending stocks to drop on corn and beans. Nothing substantial, just based on some possible cuts to Argentina. The magic question is going to be wheat, and if we continue to see that drop in world ending stocks like we have seen over several years, there's a good chance they come in and lower Russian production. I do think this isn't really the time of the year that you come in and do a lot with winter wheat. And a lot of that winter wheat is, currently in dormancy. So I'm not expecting to see a lot of changes. So kind of looking to see the February report kind of be a snoozer, and we move on to talking about the March report.
Thanks, Tyler.
You bet. Always good to visit with you, Caesar.
This is Tyler Shau from agmarkets.net. Thanks to Dr. Clark from Iowa State University and Tyler Shau from agmarkets.net. This has been Back Roads of Illinois. I am Cesar Delgado. You have a great day.